Survival hinged on every hunt. Shivering, hidden in icy mud, your rifle quivers in numb fingers. Fast-falling snow erases all sign. Hunger gnaws at your gut, days without food. But the deer ahead sense fear. One wrong move, a twitch, and it vanishes, leaving you to perish in the wilderness. This was the stark reality for mountain men. They lived strictly by nature's code. Failure carried a lethal price. Survival demanded absolute mastery of skill, endurance, and brutal tactics honed over generations. Each hunt was a life-or-death gamble. Some relied on traps. Others tracked relentlessly across vast distances. Many wielded fire, water, and the landscape itself as weapons. But how did they manage to hunt creatures that knew every inch of the terrain? And did frontiersmen employ specific, cunning techniques to secure their game? To grasp the survival strategies of frontier hunters, we must first examine their predecessors, those who laid the groundwork. Number 1. Early American hunting tactics. Robert Beverly's insights before the mountain men carved paths through the 1800s frontier. Survival hunting was already a sophisticated practice, refined by Native American peoples and later adapted by early colonists. Indigenous hunters possessed an unparalleled ability to track game and move unseen, skills that dwarfed those of European settlers. Those colonists unable to rely on trade for sustenance were forced into a rapid, brutal education. They adapted fiercely, integrating native techniques with their own innovations. Robert Beverly, a Virginia planter documenting life in the early 1700s, recorded many of these methods. His observations reveal the foundational tactics that would later define frontier survival. One notable trick was the stalking head. Hunters concealed themselves behind a decoy, often an animal head mounted on a stick, allowing them to inch slowly into firing range. Some tamed horses to walk alongside them, using the animal as a living shield against detection. Others strategically felled trees, creating blinds to ambush deer drawn to browse. Then there were the impaling stakes, sharpened wooden poles positioned where deer commonly leaped fences. A single jump could be fatal for the animal. Hares, in contrast, were hunted on foot with swift, mixed-breed dogs. If the dogs couldn't catch them outright, they would drive them into hollow trees. Once cornered, hunters lit fires at the base, using smoke to force the animals out until they dropped. This method was both swift and effective. Night hunts presented a different challenge. Small, keen-nosed dogs were used to flush out raccoons, opossums, and foxes, particularly in cornfields. But darkness brought its own dangers, necessitating larger dogs to ward off wolves, bears, and wildcats. Hunters moved decisively, guided by their hounds' barks directly to the quarry. Turkey hunting demanded patience and ingenious traps. One account describes a cage capable of snaring 17 turkeys simultaneously, though its creator struggled with resetting it without first releasing the catch. Fishing, too, required a distinct set of skills. Settlers emulated and refined native techniques like weirs and barriers that channeled fish into traps. Seines, various nets, hand lines, and even long spill yards, lines stretching across rivers with hooks spaced along their length, yielded substantial catches. While early hunters adapted these methods, the mountain men of the 1800s elevated them further, transforming silence itself into a potent weapon. Number 2. Still hunting. Unlike European aristocrats chasing foxes with loud calls and fanfares, mountain men knew such noise meant an empty belly. Here, hunting was an exercise in profound patience, absolute silence, and the ability to vanish into the landscape. Still hunting demanded that you become a phantom. Moving too quickly startled game, Breaking a twig underfoot could cost you your meal. A skilled hunter crept forward deliberately, pausing constantly to listen intently, eyes relentlessly searching for the slightest sign, the flick of an ear, a shifting shadow. Success wasn't random, it was the product of disciplined skill. Henry Herbert, writing in 1864, considered it so challenging that even a sharp-sighted novice would need years under a seasoned woodsman to approach proficiency. His assessment was accurate. Dawn offered the best opportunity. Wet ground muffled footsteps, and the woods were just stirring to life. The hunter advanced cautiously, interpreting the land like a text. Tracks in the mud, rub marks on trees, the impression of a deer's recent bed. The objective was to close the distance for a clean shot before the animal even sensed the hunter's presence. An accomplished still hunter knew where to focus their search. They avoided well-used trails where game had become wary. They read not just the footprints, but their narrative. A straight line of prints, for instance, indicated a buck on the move. Tracks tightening and winding suggested the same buck was seeking a place to rest. The truly skilled could decipher every minute detail. Upon spotting a herd, the sharpest marksman targeted the led animal. Dropping the dominant creature first often caused momentary confusion in the others, providing an opportunity for a second shot. A wasted bullet often meant miles spent tracking a wounded animal through difficult terrain, resulting in meat tainted by stress and pain. A clean kill was the only desirable outcome. The shot needed to hit a vital area, the heart, lungs, or spine, within roughly a 10-inch zone. However, if the hide was the primary goal, the aim shifted to the neck, snapping the spine cleanly to preserve the pelt unmarked. A hunter's most formidable adversary, however, wasn't the cold, the terrain, or even the game itself. It was the wind. A deer might fail to see you, might fail to hear you, but if it caught your scent, the hunt was over instantly. Still hunters always maneuvered with the wind's direction in mind, moving upwind, or at least across it. They understood the subtle flow of air, uphill in the morning, downhill as dusk settled. Even the faintest breeze, too gentle to rustle leaves, could carry a human scent directly to a buck's sensitive nostrils. And once spooked, that buck wouldn't flee alone. It would scatter the entire herd. But the forest possessed senses beyond the deer. Squirrels, ravens, and grouse served as nature's sentinels. A hunter oblivious to their alarm calls was effectively announcing their presence. Thus, the most skilled hunters learned to move like phantoms, merging seamlessly with the environment. Crucially, they never lost their way. A hunter without a sense of direction was not a predator, but potential prey to hunger, cold, and the vast, unforgiving wilderness. The finest frontiersmen retained an acute awareness of their position, remembering every step and turn, capable of retracing their path whether they had been out for hours or weeks. Even in ancient times, primitive hunters were compelled to move silently, creeping close enough to bring down game with simple weapons like clubs or spears. Centuries later, long hunters, solitary frontiersmen who subsisted by their rifles, embodied this skill. These were not casual hunters. Still hunting was the domain of professionals. Men who surrendered themselves to the land, adopted the mindset of their prey, and lived by unwavering patience, precision, and deep knowledge. Even Lewis and Clark, tasked with finding individuals capable of navigating the challenging West, recognized this. You wouldn't find a true still hunter among ordinary soldiers. You found them deep in the wild, where only the most adept survived. Indeed, still hunting was profoundly difficult. It demanded patience, honed instincts, and an intimate understanding of the natural world. But for those who mastered it, hunger was a rare companion. Sometimes, however, raw force proved more effective than subtle patience. Number 3. Game drives. Known as driving or surrounding, this tactic was adopted by mountain men from native hunters. When conditions were right, an entire group would quietly encircle game, deer, elk, even flocks of pigeons. At a prearranged signal, everyone would converge inward. The panicked animals would crowd together, their escape routes cut off. Hunters closed in rapidly, employing clubs, arrows, or rifles. Lewis and Clark witnessed the Arikara tribe executing this in 1804, trapping pronghorns crossing a river. Young warriors plunged into the water, using sticks to subdue the animals and drag them ashore. This strategy, however, has roots extending back thousands of years before settlers arrived in the West. Mountain men encountered ancient stone walls constructed by early hunters. These long, low barriers served to funnel herds into confined spaces, directly towards waiting spears and darts. Mass ambushes were another strategy. Hunting parties of 20 or more could decimate entire herds in a single action. Buffalo jumps represented a particularly brutal variant. Hunters would maneuver bison herds toward cliff edges. When the animals finally perceived the danger, they were already plunging into the abyss, their legs shattering on impact below. Tribesmen waiting at the base swiftly dispatched any survivors. The Blackfoot tribe named these sites Pishkun, translating to deep blood kettle. They understood that allowing even one buffalo to escape would educate the herd, making future hunts vastly more challenging. The most adept hunters often dictated the terms of the encounter. They didn't passively await their quarry. Number 4. Stalking. Stalking was a fundamental skill that reliably kept mountain men alive. They would identify game at a distance, then execute a silent approach, utilizing rocks, trees, and underbrush for concealment. One misstep meant failure. The animal alerted and gone. Success demanded intimate knowledge of the terrain, the wind's direction, and animal behavior to remain completely undetected. Stalking is an ancient practice, predating recorded history by millennia. Early hunters in the Great Basin employed similar lie-and-wait methods in the high mountains, patiently waiting for animals to drift into proximity. In the early 1800s, the artist George Catlin documented how Native Americans disguised themselves as wolves to hunt buffalo. Bison were programmed to flee from humans, but tended to hold their ground against wolves. Hunters exploited this, wearing wolf skins, cautiously closing the distance until it was too late for the unsuspecting animals. Catlin himself described this in 1844. The unfortunate buffaloes faced a constant enemy, man, persistently pursuing them throughout the year using every clever means devised for their destruction. They struggled in vain to evade deadly weapons. When chased across the plains by men on wild horses, they plunged into snowdrifts, becoming easy targets. Unaware, they might also encounter hunters hidden beneath a white wolf's skin, subtly approaching with fatal arms while they grazed peacefully on the open prairies, shot down before realizing the peril. This same deception was effective using decoys shaped like cows to approach antelope, deer, and elk. Animals were accustomed to cattle and largely ignored them, whereas a human silhouette instantly signaled danger. Breaking up a hunter's form with something familiar could mean the difference between starvation and a successful kill. Nevertheless, a significant risk with decoys was how quickly animals could recognize artifice. A single error, an unnatural movement, and the ruse was exposed. In open country, A decoy often offered the best chance of closing in on otherwise unapproachable game. To maximize the decoy's effectiveness, the hunter should approach from the side. Animals needed time to observe the decoy, become comfortable with its presence, and let their suspicion wane. The hunter's movement then had to be slow and steady. Never stop to peek or glass. Cattle don't stalk. Predators do. Following this, the hunter continued walking casually, naturally, like a cow with no specific destination. The hunter might select two landmarks to walk between, creating the impression of simply passing through. This afforded the animals time to relax and allowed the hunter to plan the shot. Using a decoy matching the target animal worked on the same principle. Today, archers might wear hats shaped like antelope or deer heads with coordinating shirts, another form of disguise to fool game. But this is far from new. John Smith documented Powhatan hunters using deer hides complete with buck heads to sneak up on bucks during the rutting season. It succeeded because these tribes deeply understood their prey. While it might seem absurd, dressing up like a deer when survival was on the line, looking foolish was a far better outcome than going hungry. Just remember, animals possess an innate ability to recognize their own kind. If your disguise wasn't convincing, the hunt ended before it began. And why wait for an animal to stop moving when you could make it collapse from sheer? Number 5. Relaying the arrival of horses on the northern plains transformed tribal hunting, allowing for mounted tactics. Hunters on horseback developed a relay system to pursue game like deer, elk, or pronghorns. They would chase the animals in shifts, wearing them down in circles until the exhausted prey finally collapsed. The hunters then finished the kill with arrows or clubs. In August 1805, Lewis and Clark observed Lemhi Shoshone hunters attempting this technique on a pronghorn herd, though without success. Even on favorable days, such hunts could involve 40 or 50 hunters for half a day, often yielding only 2 or 3 antelope. This method likely drew inspiration from wolf behavior. Near the Mare River in April 1805, Lewis noted wolves isolating a single animal from a herd and then pursuing it in relays, relieving one another until they achieved the kill. Persistence hunting wasn't confined to the northern plains. The Tarahumara people of northern Mexico, renowned for their extraordinary endurance, practiced a version of this tactic. They would run animals like deer and wild turkeys to exhaustion over incredible distances, sometimes covering up to 200 miles in 2 days. Their strategy involved a steady, relentless pursuit until the prey was simply unable to continue. Similarly, the Tanana Athabascans in Alaska employed persistence hunting. They tracked large game such as caribou, moose, and Dall sheep over vast distances, relying on sheer endurance to exhaust the animals before making the kill. This method was crucial for their survival, particularly during seasonal migrations when other food sources were scarce. And the mountain men of the 1800s integrated insights from these indigenous hunting strategies. While chasing could be effective, the most strategic hunters sometimes allowed their prey to come to them. Number 6. Trapping mountain men fundamentally relied on trapping for survival. Beaver pelts, in particular, fueled their existence. Beaver hats were a booming industry back east, drawing these hardy frontiersmen deep into untamed territories in pursuit of profit. Initially, traders depended on Native Americans for furs, exchanging goods like guns and knives for pelts. But as demand surged, native trappers couldn't keep pace. By the 1820s, companies began dispatching their own trappers westward. These men remained year-round, enduring brutal winters and treacherous mountains, facing constant peril. Their equipment was simple, yet effective, Heavy iron traps featuring double springs and short chains. The basic design remains in use even today. A mountain man would identify fresh beaver sign, wade into freezing streams, position the trap underwater, and secure it with a young tree cut nearby. But anchors were prone to failure. Trappers quickly devised a solution, attaching a float stick to the chain. If the anchor dislodged, the stick would surface, indicating a captured animal below. Once the trap was set, the trapper applied bait. Beavers aggressively defended their territory, marking boundaries with scent produced by glands called casters. Trappers exploited this. After killing a beaver, they removed its castor glands and stored the potent scent. At a new location, the trapper would smear the foreign castor scent above the concealed trap. Local beavers, compelled to investigate the intrusion, would step directly into the trap's powerful jaws. Mountain men possessed an intimate understanding of beaver habits, recognizing signs like chewed trees, muddy slides, and fresh scent marks. They mastered various trapping techniques. Foothold traps consisted of iron jaws hidden just below the water's surface in shallow areas. Once triggered, escape was nearly impossible. Snares were simpler, loops fashioned from rope or sinew placed along frequently used beaver trails. As the animal passed through, the loop tightened, holding it fast. Deadfalls were another method, heavy logs or rocks precariously balanced above bait. The slightest disturbance triggered a sudden, lethal collapse. Precision and timing were critical for this trap. Trappers operated alone or in small groups, deploying traps along miles of rivers and streams. Harsh weather, difficult terrain, and fierce competition made it exceptionally dangerous work. Nevertheless, the fur trade significantly declined in the late 1830s due to changing fashion trends and the depletion of beaver populations. Consequently, mountain men were forced to adapt, turning to roles like guiding settlers westward or discovering new means of survival. But during its peak, trapping defined a unique and demanding way of life. Now for the final hunting technique we'll cover in this episode. Some hunters manipulated the land itself. Number 7. Burning. Occasionally, mountain men adopted an ancient native tactic, deliberately setting fires in the woods. It was a straightforward yet effective method to clear dense undergrowth, facilitating faster movement and easier tracking of prey. By burning dry leaves and fallen timber, hunters could also strategically direct game toward areas they controlled, significantly increasing their hunting odds. However, this method was not without its drawbacks. Thaddeus Harris, traveling through western Pennsylvania in 1803, expressed regret and indignation at the practice. He wrote, "We observed with sorrow and anger the careless destruction of these magnificent forests. For over 50 miles to the west and north, the mountains were aflame. This was caused by white hunters who ignited dry leaves and decayed wood in the valleys to thin the undergrowth, hoping to traverse the woods more easily in pursuit of game. But they defeated their own purpose, as the fires drove moose, deer, and other wild animals further north and west, and destroyed turkeys, partridges, and quails during nesting season or while they were leading their young broods." Yet Harris overlooked a crucial aspect. Fire wasn't purely destructive, it was also a catalyst for renewal. Soon after a burn, fresh, more nutritious grasses emerged, attracting wildlife back in greater numbers. Furthermore, Lewis and Clark documented the Hidatsa tribe burning prairie grasslands in the spring, specifically to draw buffalo herds to the new growth for grazing. So yes, burning was risky, but it also offered practical advantages. Sacrificing a portion of the forest today could mean more productive hunting grounds tomorrow.